world, let's chat it up. We're talking competitions, uniforms, and all of the above. It's the Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Moms, your podcast is on.
It's spring cheer season, which means it's the spring. Happy spring. Almost. You know what that means. For many, it's ill-fitting uniform season. I don't know the average age of an all-star cheerleader in the US, but I'm going to guess it's between the ages of 10 and we'll say 16. Those are like prime growing years for girls. The uniform that fit back in June or July may fit differently in different places in March and April. But you're not going to buy a new uniform. We can't buy a new uniform, especially if it's going to be retired at the end of the season. Then you're just like wearing it for a month or like one competition. No. So it poses a problem for cheer moms and their beautiful young ladies. I chuckle every year, because I knew that uniform fit perfectly 9 months ago. And it's got to be uncomfortable, right? Like it's not comfortable for the girls. We can't judge them. We can't criticize. We shouldn't. It's just awkward for all. I would just say, girls, just watch how you sit in your uniforms. Maybe some of the uniform companies can do like a package deal where there's like warm-ups that come with the uniform, like warm-up pants, warm-up jackets. So you only have to wear your uniform just for the time you're competing. You can throw on those pants or shorts afterward. The tops seem to be fine. It's the pulling and the tugging of the skirts that I notice more in the springtime. And just be careful out there. Ladies, be careful out there. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make anybody feel awkward or self-conscious. But let's look out for each other, right? Let's be girls. Let's look out for each other. Maybe there's a situation where you have multiple teams at your gym and one of the older girls can lend her skirt to a girl who has had a growth spurt. Or, I don't know, maybe get a size a little bigger at the beginning of the season. I don't know. It's just, it's like having a crystal ball or predicting the weather. Like you can't predict if and when they're going to have a growth spurt. But I just wonder, is it possible? This is just me like thinking out loud. Is it possible to size up in the summertime, have it altered, but not where they cut the fabric so that there's room in the spring to let it out or make the length longer if needed? I learned how to sew when I was little, like we did the butterick patterns and stuff, and I could never get it, and I gave up very quickly. So I don't really know about altering and how any of that works, but in my head it makes sense. Okay, enough of that. I feel like I'm digging myself in a deeper hole here. Today is going to be a Q&A, question and answer, strictly about cheerleading. Or maybe not strictly. There's a couple in here that's not strictly cheerleading. It's the Cheer Mom podcast, so we cheer themed. And I put this out to the Facebook group. I put it out to my Instagram stories. And you guys had your questions, and I'm excited to answer some of them. So here we go. Have you ever met someone with a tattoo and asked them why they chose that specific tattoo? They probably had a story about how it's significant to them. I have 3 tattoos, and they all have a very deep and meaningful significance to me. And every time someone comments on one, I'm like, thanks. And then I give them like a 5-minute explanation about why it's important to me. Even if tattoos aren't your thing, I think that we all need little encouragements and things that are specific to us, that remind us of the things we love most and the words that motivate us to keep going. And that's why I started TCC Jewelry. The necklaces, bracelets, and rings are simple and engraved with little words that have special meaning, like hit 0, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 1, 3, 5, 7, and more. And check out the new collections like the Faith Collection and introducing the Dance Collection, baseball, softball, and volleyball collections. Get something special for yourself or that special athlete or coach in your life today by visiting tccjewelry.com and enter coupon code CheerMomPod for 15% off your order. That's tccjewelry.com and enter coupon code CheerMomPod for 15% off. Okay, first question. I need to see if I'm overreacting or not. If your kid is on 2 teams and the gym calls extra practices for 8+ hours straight, would you expect a lunch or dinner break and the ability to bring food for them? It seems unreasonable to withhold food all day from athletes, right? Oh, and of course, the staff brought food in for themselves. I don't think you're overreacting. In my experience, there's a few things going on here. A lot of times, if you have an athlete who is a crossover, they're crossing over to a team that has different coaches. When my daughter was a crossover, the coaches would always forget that she just came from another practice or that she was on more than one team. They're not always thinking about that. It's not that they don't appreciate crossovers, but they're thinking about the team as a whole. And when they schedule things and when they do things, they're thinking about what that team can do and what that team of coaches schedules allow for. Sometimes it just coincidentally adds up to 8+ hours of practice or choreography in a day. I would say most of the time that's not typical to have that many hours, but this is a really big, good opportunity for your athlete to advocate for themselves. So it's really good practice because it's not high risk to ask for a break between team practices. So if that doesn't feel comfortable for your athlete and they just want to be a team player and they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble or that the coach is going to say no for whatever reason, then communicate ahead of time and say, hey, I am practicing for 8 hours between both teams that day. When is a good time for me to take a lunch break or to rest a bit so I can be fresh and 100% for both teams? And I would almost guarantee you that the coaches will be like, oh, yeah, usually the athlete can skip conditioning or conditioning on the back end of the first practice or warm up for the second practice because they're already warm. That was my daughter's experiences. They're like, you're already warmed up, so just skip warm up, which sometimes can be like the first half an hour of a team practice, or they're talking or they're going through something. That's a really good time when they're not stunting, when they're not running the routine, when they're not working on sections. That's a good time for the athlete to ask for a break. But again, the coaches are focused on coaching the team, and they're not going to automatically think, oh, Maddie, you need to take a break. Maddie, fictional name that I just made up. The name exists. I didn't make it up. Maddie needs to advocate for herself and ask. And she doesn't, I feel like it would, for me, it would feel intimidating to raise my hand in the middle of practice and say it in front of everyone that like, hey, excuse me, I need a break. Maybe your daughter has that kind of moxie and that kind of confidence. I've definitely met those daughters in cheer throughout my journeys, and that's great. But if that feels a little too intimidating for your daughter, even to remind them, maybe have her approach a coach that she's comfortable with to say, hey, is now a good time for me to take a break? I just finished this practice. So no, you're not overreacting. They're not withholding food. They're just not really thinking about that because, well, it's only a 4-hour practice. Like they can eat before or eat after or both. So you really do have to help your athlete advocate for themselves in those situations. And yeah, the coaches are bringing in food for themselves because they're not only there for 8 hours, sometimes they're there for 12, 14 hours. And sometimes the team moms are bringing lunch in for them because they know that the coaches are there all day, that it's a long work day. So I wouldn't hold it against the coaches that they're bringing in lunch for themselves. And that is something that I talk about in all of my crossover episodes and conversations is where's the structure for her to be able to take breaks in between practices, or in the event that we have all day practices for both teams, what are the accommodations that can be made for her to rest her body and refuel. My daughter didn't always want to eat in the middle of all of that because I don't think I would either. I don't even think I could even eat a sandwich and then go turn around and do back handsprings. I would probably puke. So a lot of times the kids don't even really want a big lunch or something. So maybe send them with some light protein and a sports drink and make sure they have plenty of water. But a lot of times they don't need like a huge long break. They're ready to go. They're driven, obviously, because they're asked to be a crossover. I would imagine they have FOMO, like they want to get out on the mat. So this is not about your daughter being viewed as lazy or anything like that. I know you just want to make sure that she's nourished and hydrated. So have that conversation in advance with the coaches. Ideally, when you're first asked to allow her to be a crossover. But then again, like I said, that's a really good opportunity to have your daughter start to practice advocating for herself and asking for what she needs. Next question. Why is it the parent's responsibility to pay for coaches to attend cheer sport, NCAA, summit, etc.? Why does that not fall on the responsibility of the gym or coaches themselves? I honestly feel like our gym wants us to go to these competitions, even though our teams are not competitive, just to help pay for coaches. Am I missing something? There were 167 comment responses on this particular post, and not all of them were kind, but this is a prime example of how we don't view All-Star Cheer as a business, and it is a business. Even some All-Star Cheer gym owners don't really understand how business works. So that's, I think, a culture where we're missing something in All-Star Cheer. It's a business. Like, they care about your kids and they care about cheerleading, but at the end of the day, it's still a business. Just as an example, when you go to everyone's favorite, Lululemon, you're paying for quality leisure or athletic wear. But that price also includes and it accounts for the retail price that you pay accounts for what it costs them to buy that item. But also they factor in labor, like what they pay their employees. They factor in electric bills. They factor in rent. They factor in supplies like hangers and receipt tape and the little fun gadgets that they use to put on the price tags. There's so much that's involved in so much expense that's involved in running a business that has to be factored in to the price that the consumer pays. That's just how businesses stay afloat. I'm not trying to sound judgmental, but the thing that stood out about this to me is the gym owners can just lump all that together. And that's why it's so hard to put out there how much you guys pay for tuition, because lots of gyms break down their tuition differently because of things like this. So sometimes you just pay a lump sum and that's what you pay, and the gym allocates it out to the expenses where they need it to go. I surmise that parents are asking for more transparency from their gym owners, which is great as long as you're willing to kind of put the pieces together, especially in situations like this. So the gym may say, okay, this is our base tuition. let's say it's $200 a month. That's what you're paying for classes, for team practices, things like that. And again, like people ask, why do they charge for open gym? It's costing the gym to turn the lights on. Like that costs hundreds of dollars a day, I'm going to say, and they have to pay the coaches to be there. Or why do they charge for tryouts? Because they have to pay the coaches. The coaches are hourly employees that they have to somehow cover for that pay. It's not just that your athlete tries out to for the gym to be able to pay for their labor, but that's just one of the reasons why there's a charge on things that parents are like, why is there a charge for this? Because it doesn't cost you anything. It absolutely costs the gym something. So back to the transparency thing. So let's say it's $200 a month for your tuition. Some gyms will break that down and then they say, okay, and we're going to travel or we're going to participate in these competitions. So it's 4 local competitions and 2 travel competitions. I'm just making that up. There are registration fees associated with each competition. I know you guys know this. I'm not trying to talk to you like you're 5, but I appreciate knowing how things work. And maybe the athletes who are listening want to know how things work too. So you have registration fees associated with that. When we talked to Danielle Johnston a while back, she talked a little bit about this, is that, okay, let's say the registration fee, you go on the website for whatever competition and it says it's $146 per athlete. But then if you go in and do the math with your gym, it turns out they're charging $150 or $155 an athlete. And it's okay, like where is that $10 going? Danielle, I learned something new. It says you have to compensate for the time that it takes for the employee to register each individual athlete and put the rosters together and do all of the paperwork and the admin that's required to register athletes for a competition. And I'm telling you, like, that's not a small task. It's tedious, and EPs are streamlining that, but there's still some troubleshooting involved. And it does take, I would say, almost like an entire job of somebody who is doing things like that, like registering teams and submitting birth certificates and registering for, if they're members of the USASF, registering for that and making sure that the gym is in compliance with things like ages and athlete counts for a certain size team. And so there has to be some kind of processing fee or administrative fee associated with that. I was like, okay, I get that. So then you have your travel and coaches fees. And I think that's what this question asker is referring to, that, well, hey, wait, why should we have to pay for the coaches to go? Who is going to pay for that? Some of the responses in the comments were like, the gym should pay for that. Where do you think the gym gets their money? From their customer. So I think it's a two-edged sword for the gym owners, because here they are trying to be transparent about where the money is going and why they have to charge what they charge, and they're breaking that down for you. And then the cheer parent turns around and says, why are we paying for the coaches to do this? If it were all lumped together, like when you pay for a new laptop, like you're paying for the employee who inspects that. You're paying for, there are lots of instances just in the US economy where your consumer price that you're paying is going toward things like employee travel in a very roundabout way, but still. So I appreciate the question. I think on the side of us wanting more transparency in the cheer industry, we're going to have to accept some of these hard truths. I know that there have been some bad actors out there who have mismanaged funds, and we're wary of that. And that's a whole different discussion. But it goes back to, if you don't trust your gym owners, you probably shouldn't be at that gym. So if you trust your gym owners, know that they are doing the best that they can with what they're charging. And I don't know a gym owner who lays awake in bed at night thinking, how can I get more money out of my customers? Like they're genuinely thinking about your athletes and they care about the kids and they don't want any kid to be excluded because the price got too high and they couldn't afford it. And so they're always looking for ways to save money for you guys. But some of these things are just hard costs and a harsh reality with the cost of travel and the cost of hotel and things like that. And I will tell you that most gyms, like the coaches, are sharing rooms. Maggie with Flyer Athletics said on the episode where she was on, she has in her parent meeting, she explains, we decided to get this hotel over that hotel because then we could double people up, or we decided to get an Airbnb because then everybody could stay in the same house and it saves $1,000 that you guys aren't having to contribute to, things like that. And I would venture to guess that the gym owners are not passing on the entire cost to you guys, but at the end of the day, they have to make money to pay for things, and that money comes from us as the customer and the consumer. I'm not 100% happy about it either because it gets really expensive, but I think that's just a harsh reality that we have to deal with. I think another issue that's coming up that I think has already started to come up is we want more security at cheer competitions, and I totally agree with that, but there is a byproduct of that, and that byproduct is going to have to be being patient to wait in lines. If we want bag searches, I know that lots of different companies are looking into different options and random bag searches or clear bag policies, and we need to be ready for that. But we need to be able to be willing to sacrifice convenience for things like safety. I think it's another example of that. Like we want transparency. Here's transparency. Here's where all this money is going. At some point, I think it needs to be good enough. Not all of that was directed toward the question asker, but it is a question that goes around a lot. And my long-winded answer goes to a lot of the different branches and offshoots of that question. So hopefully that helps.
Do you want to get that high pony looking slick and clean every time? Well, whether it's competition hair, getting that super clean look for your choreography, or even just that cute, trendy low bun for going out with friends, Slick Hair Company is your answer. Slick Hair Company is the founder of the original Slick Stick, and they also provide high-quality hair care, hair accessories, and styling products that will help you to achieve the perfect style and look. I used their wax stick for that middle part low bun look, and it was awesome. I was even able to curl my hair the next day without washing it, and my hair wasn't all greasy and gross. Founded by a female entrepreneur, Slick Hair uses cruelty-free ingredients that smooths all hair types. They hydrate and strengthen your hair. They promote hair growth and leave your hair feeling fresh and not greasy or sticky. Visit slickhaircompany.com/thecheermomblog and use code thecheermomblog for 10% off your entire order. That's slickhaircompany.com/thecheermomblog and use code thecheermomblog for 10% off. Your perfect style awaits with Slick Hair Company.
All right. Genuinely curious if anyone is experiencing this. Is your gym asking for both hotel information for stay to play, which should already be available to them, and flight information? If so, respectfully, what's your take on it? I honestly don't mind giving stay to play hotel information, but all my flight info? It's a fair question, and it has an easy answer. So the hotel information, yes, they do have access to the stay to play info, but sometimes the info isn't always put in, I won't say correctly, like it's not put in incorrectly, but things like roommates are not always accounted for. Not all of that information, at least used to be like this, that not all of that information always carries over in the information that the coaches have access to. So let's say there are two rooms where 5 athletes are split between, they want to make sure they know where those athletes are in case they need to find them. A great example of this was many years ago. So we are in Colorado. When we fly to Orlando, it's a 2-hour time difference. UCA weekend, I think almost always falls on daylight savings, spring forward. So not only do you have a 2-hour jump in time, now you're adding spring forward from day 1 to day 2. And that's a potential, like that's a recipe for disaster when you have an early meet time. That happened to us one year. Our meet time was something like 6:30 a.m. Had to be on the bus, bow to toe ready. Oh, it was awful. Inevitably, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, there is always going to be the athlete that alarm didn't go off, slept through the alarm. It happened to me in high school. It was one of the most horrifying days of my life where we had all overslept and we get a phone call and the team mom was like, "You're supposed to be on the bus right now." And like, we hadn't even gotten out of bed. It's horrifying. So the coaches ask for, a lot of times they'll ask for that hotel information. Thank God that our coach did, because it was like, where is she? Where is she? Does anyone know where she is? And the team mom and the coach were able to look up her room number, and a group of moms, or I don't know how many people it was, like might have just been one, went to the hotel room, and sure enough, they had overslept. And that's why the coaches need the hotel information so that they can account for all of their athletes when needed. They're not spying on you. They're sometimes, especially with the older athletes, sometimes they'll do random room checks and knock on the door and make sure that you're in for curfew. I don't know of many coaches or any coaches that do that anymore, because with the iPhone, they just send selfies of yourself like in your room. But that's the main reason why they need your hotel information. In case you're missing, in case they need to find you, they know the first place to look. As for flight information, that's another kind of process of elimination. If Susie doesn't show up for practice on the travel day, okay, what flight is she on? Is it delayed? Coaches also want to know, because we all book our travel hopefully months in advance, right? Ideally months and months in advance. So a lot of times the coaches will ask for your flight info, because then they can see, like, they're not experts on what flights get in at what time, just on a general basis. Like the flight 238 from Atlanta to Dallas always lands at 4 p.m. They don't have that information filed away in their brains. So if they have everybody's flight info, they can see, okay, it looks like everybody is on the same 2 or 3 flights. It looks like the last group of athletes gets in by this time, and that allows them to schedule their team practices based on those times. For larger competitions, and even for some of the regional competitions, a lot of times the larger gyms will offer up their gym space for rent for practice times. So those go out way in advance, and you have to sign up for a time slot. And if you don't know when your athletes get there, it's hard to find a time slot. And a lot of times those slots get booked up, they get scooped up really fast. So if, again, like all my athletes are going to be here by Thursday night at midnight, great, we can have a practice by noon on Friday. But if your athletes aren't getting in until later, you're going to need to know that as a coach. It did take me off guard the first time I got the email saying, send all of your flight info. I was like, wait, like, you're not my mom. But then I understood, okay, they need to know where everybody is. And God forbid if something happened. Again, these coaches are concerned about their athletes and their families. And if there's something that happens with a flight or a plane, it's, oh, were any of our athletes on that plane that got rerouted to another state? And they can easily look that information up because you've given it to them. So there's nothing nefarious happening there. They just need to know where all of their athletes are leading into a big competition. Last question. Any tips on if an athlete has a late performance time? We have early meet times figured out. This is such a great question. I think it's different for everyone. You have your night owls, you have your early birds, you have your morning people. It really depends on the age. I think with no matter what, like unless your meet time is at 10 a.m. and you perform at 2 p.m., that's going to be great just about for anybody, no matter how old they are, but it's different for different age groups. So with the littles, if they have a late meet time, they're not going to want to sit still. They're going to try to burn all of their energy before they even get to compete. So let's start with the example of littles. I would say no pool time, which sucks. I would say no theme park time. I know it also sucks. The sun will, it's like a sieve that drains all of their energy. Then you have a bunch of sunburnt minis who are all sweaty and exhausted from the day, and then they have to go into a whole cheer competition process. So that I really hate that for all of us, that it's like, ugh, let's not do anything and let's coop everybody up in the room. But that's the reality of it. And I think most programs have rules or boundaries or guidelines around park time and outside time, especially while the athletes need to be in competition mode. The littles are more likely to be the ones stunting in the pool and spending all of that energy playing. I think the older ones, they just want to sit by the pool, so it's a little bit different. I think for the younger ones, indoor activities, maybe incentivizing them with a special or fun breakfast in bed. Maybe not a sleepover in the hotel room, but maybe everybody gets together in a hotel spot for breakfast. Anything to keep them cool and calm. I think it's not a terrible idea to go watch some of the competition. So if the littles are at night, it's likely that the older ones are going to be earlier in the day. So that's not a bad idea to just be in the competition venue. It's stimulating, but not as stimulating as the sun or running around the hotel lobby all day long and driving you crazy. So going to the venue and watching some good cheerleading isn't a bad idea. I actually think it's a great idea because then they can see the older kids competing and aspire to be higher level athlete if that's what they want. And if you choose to stay in the hotel the whole time, maybe you do the get ready process in different stages to keep them engaged. So you start with hair. Okay, let's do your hair. And then you can go play. And then a couple hours later, okay, let's do your makeup or something like that, where it gives them moments to engage and be occupied while still keeping their head in the game of cheer. Movies are always a good idea. I think one year we took a bunch of our youth level cheerleaders to a movie inside, and that was great. But yeah, it's tough. And so the older athletes, it's a little bit easier because they sleep in anyway. They can be a little bit more responsible outside in the pool, like maybe rent a cabana. Everybody go in on a cabana and the girls can be in the shade, but at the pool. The danger with the older ones is later in the day, the more time they have to think about their compete time, the more opportunity they have to get in their head. I don't have an easy solution for that, but I would definitely recommend looking at Coach Lane's resources and Jeff with Mind Body Cheer, his resources I'm sure that they have some exercises for meditation and visualization and things to stay centered. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the high school kids maybe encourage them. This will probably have to come from coaches over parents, but maybe encourage them to all sign up for a yoga class, or somebody do yoga, or somebody do a team activity that's going to help them relax. That's going to help them to stay focused and not give them, use that time to their advantage rather than giving them an opportunity to get more and more nervous as the day goes on. Hopefully that helps. Harmony Farms. Okay, fun Q&A. I like doing these. I like knowing what you guys are thinking about and what you're worried about. So always send in those questions. And don't forget to send in your nominations for the Cheer Mom of the Week. I would love to shout them out and their team and their program out on the podcast. So if you have a cheer mom who is going above and beyond, who is being extra kind, or who is just doing cool stuff in cheer, feel free, send an email to hello@wonderfuldaymedia.com and use the subject line Cheer Mom of the Week, and I would love to give them a shout out. Until next time, guys, remember it's just cheerleading. Go out there, have fun, and I'll talk to you again soon.
What up, party people? This is Jason Larkins, host of the Let's Talk Cheer podcast, and I've teamed up with Kristen Wheeler of the Cheer Mom podcast and Dan Cotton of the Cheer Biz podcast.
That's right. Hey, everybody, Kristen here. We know that you love cheer, so why not dive into more perspectives? Tune into my podcast, the Cheer Mom podcast, for cheer issues spoken from the parent's perspective. Then head over to Dan's podcast, the Cheer Biz podcast, to learn from a gym owner on how to run a successful cheer business. And of course, don't miss the Let's Talk Cheer podcast featuring Jason Larkins, the one that we all know and love, where they talk about cheer from a coach's perspective.
Which means whether you're a coach, a cheer parent, or a gym owner, we've got you covered. Find all 3 podcasts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and stay tuned for new episodes each week.